Prince Harry may have unknowingly signed the document that could dismantle his entire future. A single clause, buried deep, hidden in plain sight. And if Tom Bower is right, the countdown may have already begun. For years, the world has watched the marriage of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle as a modern fairy tale turned global controversy. But now, royal biographer Tom Bower is raising a claim that reframes everything. Not rumor, not palace gossip, a legal detail. Page 14, Clause 7. A provision allegedly added in a later amendment to their prenuptial agreement, one that Harry may not have fully understood when he signed it. And if that sounds dramatic, hey, race why it matters. Because in high-profile marriages involving global brands, intellectual property is power. And power, in California, is governed by a completely different legal philosophy than the traditions of the British monarchy. This isn't just about personal wealth. It's about control of narrative, ownership of projects, future revenue, brand authority, custody leverage, long-term positioning. According to Bower, the clause in question centers on intellectual property rights tied to joint ventures created after the marriage. That includes streaming content, publishing deals, charitable branding, and any commercial enterprise built under the Sussex identity. In modern celebrity economics, IP isn't a side detail, it is the crown jewel. And hey, race where things take a turn. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle relocated to California in 2020, they entered a legal environment shaped by community property law. In that system, income earned during marriage is typically split equally. But a well-drafted prenuptial amendment can reshape that default structure, especially when it comes to ownership versus revenue participation. Bower's claim is that the amendment signed during their post-royal transition didn't merely divide assets. It reassigned control. Control of the Sussex brand. Control of future licensing. Control of long-term content exploitation. And if true, that shifts the balance dramatically. Because public perception has long framed Harry as the royal anchor, the inherited title, the lineage, the global recognition. Yet Bower argues that legally, the operational architecture may favor Meghan. Now, hey race, the first critical question: why would such an amendment be introduced in 2020? That year wasn't just a relocation. It was a corporate reset. The launch of new entities. The signing of major entertainment deals. The formal distancing from Buckingham Palace. In moments of massive structural change, legal documents evolve too. Bower, a former barrister and veteran BBC journalist, has built a career investigating high-power figures. He previously exposed business empires and media giants with documentation that withstood scrutiny. His methodology is forensic interviews, paper trails, legal cross-checks. That background is precisely why this claim has captured attention. Because if an amendment was inserted during the couple's transition into commercial independence, its timing becomes as important as its wording. And hey race the rehook, if this clause exists as described, it could explain decisions that once seemed disconnected: strategic PR shifts, solo branding efforts, the re-engagement of crisis management specialists, and subtle business restructurings that began as early as 2022. Coincidence? Or preparation? This is where the story moves beyond speculation and into pattern analysis. Over the past few years, observers have noticed Meghan's increasing presence as the primary listed executive on business filings, solo trademark registrations, independent media projects, strategic positioning that appears structurally insulated. Individually, those moves can be explained as entrepreneurial independence. Collectively, they form a sequence, and sequences tell stories. But hey race, what makes this especially significant: if Harry did sign an amendment without fully grasping its long-term implications, the consequences would not be immediate. They would be delayed, activated only under specific circumstances. Legal dominoes don't fall until triggered. Which brings us to the central tension. Is this merely smart brand management within a complex marriage? Or is it the quiet groundwork of a contingency plan years in the making? We're not at the answer yet. We're just at the foundation. Because to understand whether this clause is protective, strategic, or potentially devastating, we need to examine what changed after 2020: the money flow, the corporate structures, and the PR recalibration that followed. And once those pieces align, the significance of page 14, Clause May 7th, become impossible to ignore. If the alleged clause was the foundation, 2022 was the turning point, because that's when the structure began to move. On the surface, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle appeared unified red carpets, carefully managed interviews, high-profile appearances that reinforced the image of a joint enterprise. But beneath the headlines, something quieter was unfolding. Business registrations were being adjusted. Trademarks were being filed. Revenue streams were being categorized in ways that legal experts immediately recognize as significant. In Hey Race the Rehook, the most important changes weren't announced. They were filed. According to reporting tied to Tom Bower's investigation, Meghan's name began appearing first on key documentation connected to their ventures. That detail may sound cosmetic. It isn't. In corporate structuring, order can indicate authority. Authority determines control, and control becomes critical if partnerships dissolve. Now consider the timeline. In 2020, the Sussexes signed a widely publicized production agreement with Netflix. The public narrative focused on a potential nine-figure valuation, but industry insiders later clarified that such deals are performance-based. Maximum value depends on deliverables, completion rates, renewals, extensions. By 2022, projects were being reevaluated. Some were shelved, others quietly reduced. Around the same time, Meghan began filing trademarks under her own name, including the lifestyle venture American Riviera Orchard. Hey Race, why that matters. A solo trademark is not just branding, it's asset insulation. If intellectual property is registered independently, future revenue tied to that IP flows independently. It does not automatically integrate into joint marital enterprises, especially if the prenuptial amendment carved out IP rights with precision. That brings us back to the clause. If page 14, Clause 7 grants majority ownership or decision-making authority over joint intellectual property, and if subsequent projects were structured under Meghan's executive control, then the long game becomes clearer. But clarity raises more questions. Because in January 2026, reports surfaced that Meghan re-engaged Sunshine Sachs, the crisis management powerhouse known for navigating high-profile celebrity separations. This wasn't their first collaboration. Sunshine Sachs had worked with Meghan as early as 2017, when her relationship with Harry first became public. The firm specializes in narrative stabilization during reputational risk. Divorce strategy often falls squarely into that category. So why bring them back now? Hey Race the Rehook crisis firms are rarely reactive. They are preemptive. PR professionals understand that public perception shapes legal leverage. Sympathy influences settlement dynamics. Media framing affects long-term brand survivability. If a separation were ever to occur, the spouse positioned as composed, stable, and professionally independent would hold a measurable advantage both in court and in public opinion. Meanwhile, Harry's legal battles against British media organizations intensified. Court appearances became emotional. Statements focused heavily on press intrusion and institutional betrayal. Observers described visible strain, which raises a delicate but critical question. While one spouse was consolidating independent commercial infrastructure, was the other escalating costly legal conflicts? Financial advisors often describe this as divergent strategy, one partner fortifying, the other defending. And then there's the Montecito property. Real estate records show the home structured under protections aligned with California's homestead laws. That's not unusual for high-net-worth individuals. But combined with solo ventures and IP control, it suggests layered financial safeguarding. Individually, each decision can be explained logically. Collectively, they resemble preparation. We still don't know whether that preparation is defensive or anticipatory. But hey Race, what cannot be ignored since 2022? The pattern has shifted from joint ambition to parallel independence. And if the alleged clause activates under divorce conditions, then every independent trademark, every solo contract, every PR recalibration begins to look less like coincidence and more like sequencing. The question now isn't whether change occurred. It's whether it was contingency planning or countdown.
That conversation I'm never going to share. But at the time it was awkward. I was a bit shocked.
Can you tell us what the question was?
No, I'm not comfortable sharing that.
Okay.
To go.
If Section 2 exposed the financial shift, Section 3 forces a harder question: who actually controls the Sussex empire? Because in modern celebrity economics, the real asset isn't cash. It's control over story, image, and intellectual property. And according to claims raised by Tom Bower, that control may not sit where the public assumes. Hey Race the Rehook, what if the most valuable royal export of the last decade isn't a title, but a trademark? After stepping back from royal duties in 2020, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle pivoted into content production, publishing, and commercial partnerships. The transition wasn't gradual. It was immediate. Within months, production deals were signed, foundations structured, media appearances calibrated. But building a brand and owning a brand are two different things. Corporate filings show that in several instances, Meghan's name appears as the primary listed executive. In California corporate law, that detail carries weight. Decision-making authority flows through designated officers. And when intellectual property is attached to those entities, executive control becomes leverage. According to Bower's sources, the 2020 amendment to the prenuptial agreement allegedly included language specifying intellectual property governance in the event of separation. If accurate, this wouldn't simply split profits. It would determine who steers the future of any content already created: documentaries, podcasts, publishing rights, licensing extensions. That includes the ripple effects of Harry's memoir Spare and any derivative works or future adaptations. Hey Race, why that's critical. Intellectual property doesn't end when a marriage does. It generates long-tail revenue, royalties, international rights, streaming renewals, documentary resale, translation editions. The spouse who controls IP governance controls the future pipeline. Now layer in another factor. By 2023, Meghan's public appearances increasingly centered on solo initiatives, independent brand launches, lifestyle positioning, entrepreneurial identity separate from royal narrative. Meanwhile, Harry's media presence remained closely tied to his royal past: legal battles with the press, commentary on institutional reform, reflections on family estrangement. Two trajectories, one increasingly commercial, the other increasingly personal. Hey Race, the next rehook in divorce litigation. Courts examine not just assets but stability. California family courts prioritize continuity for children, primary caregiver status, consistent residence, established routines. If one parent is perceived as the operational anchor of the household while the other is engaged in international legal disputes, that perception carries weight. Bower's suggestion is not that custody outcomes are predetermined, but that positioning matters long before filings occur. And positioning has been unfolding quietly. Then there's the psychological dimension. Public interviews over the past 2 years have shown Harry visibly emotional when discussing media treatment and institutional grievances. Emotional transparency can humanize, but in high-stakes litigation, volatility can be reframed as instability. By contrast, Meghan's recent public posture has been controlled, measured, focused on entrepreneurship and lifestyle branding. The optics are subtle, but optics matter. This is where narrative and legal strategy intersect. If, and it remains, and if the alleged clause in the prenup amendment grants Meghan decision-making authority over joint IP and commercial assets, then the structural advantage is already embedded. No dramatic confrontation required. No sudden announcement necessary. Just activation. And hey Race, the unsettling possibility, what if the strategy was never reactive? What if the amendment wasn't protection against risk, but preparation for it? We are not yet at confirmation, but the architecture is visible. Financial independence fortified, intellectual property consolidated, PR infrastructure re-engaged, legal residence firmly established in California. If separation were ever initiated, the groundwork appears complete. Which brings us to the final and most uncomfortable question: does Harry fully understand the legal terrain surrounding him? Because if the clause exists as described buried on page 14, Clause 7, then the real shift didn't begin in 2022. It began the moment the pen touched paper.
I know the fact that she'll be really unbelievably good at the job part of it as well is obviously a huge relief to me, because she'll be able to deal with everything else that comes with it. But no, you know, we're a fantastic team. We know we are. And
if the amendment was signed in 2020 and the financial restructuring accelerated in 2022, then 2026 may be the activation point. Race the rehook under California law, timing is not emotional. It's procedural. To file for divorce in California, at least one spouse must have lived in the state for 6 months. Meghan Markle has firmly established California residency for years. The jurisdiction is not in question. The only unknown is intent. According to claims amplified by Tom Bower, if Meghan were to file within a specific window following renewed PR alignment and business consolidation, the prenuptial amendment would immediately govern asset division and intellectual property control. And that's where the alleged Clause 7 becomes critical. Because prenups don't negotiate after filing. They activate. If the amendment grants majority control over joint intellectual property, then future content derived from the Sussex brand documentaries, adaptations, licensing extensions could be directed unilaterally. If business entities are structured with Meghan as primary executive, operational continuity would remain intact even during litigation. Meanwhile, what does Harry stand to lose? Not just revenue. Influence. Prince Harry's public identity has become intertwined with the Sussex commercial structure. If control of that structure shifts legally to Meghan, Harry's leverage in shaping future narratives diminishes. His memoir, his media projects, even potential follow-ups could be contractually limited depending on IP governance clauses. There's another dimension: real estate. The Montecito property, structured under California homestead protections, is insulated in ways that prioritize the resident custodial parent. Courts look for stability for children, residence consistency, educational continuity. If Meghan is established as the primary day-to-day caregiver, a factor often considered in custody evaluations, her claim to residential continuity strengthens. Race the rehook divorce litigation is rarely about sudden collapse. It's about prepared leverage. Observers have noted Harry's increasingly emotional public posture, particularly in court battles against British media groups. Legal experts understand that prolonged litigation drains capital. Millions can disappear in extended press lawsuits. If one spouse is fortifying independent revenue while the other absorbs legal costs, the financial asymmetry widens. And asymmetry changes negotiation power. Bower has suggested that Harry may sense instability but may not fully grasp the legal mechanics surrounding him. Whether that interpretation is fair remains debated. What's not debated is the structural groundwork: corporate filings, IP registration, PR reinforcement appears methodical. Then there's the strategic re-engagement of Sunshine Sachs. Crisis management firms are brought in before reputational events, not after. Their role is to seed narrative, manage tone, and stabilize public sympathy in advance. If separation were ever announced, the groundwork for public positioning would already be in place. And so the pieces align: a prenuptial amendment allegedly expanding IP control, independent business filings accelerating in 2022, solo brand launches under exclusive ownership, legal residence secured in California, crisis PR specialists quietly returning, individually defensible, collectively strategic. The final rehook, if a filing were to occur, it would not feel sudden. It would feel inevitable, because the legal dominoes would not fall randomly. They would fall exactly as structured 6 years earlier on page 14, Clause 7.
Look, I was really ashamed to say it at the time, and ashamed to have to admit it to Harry, especially, because I know how much loss he's suffered. But I knew that if I didn't say it, that I would do it, and I just didn't want to be alive anymore.
If Tom Bower's investigation proves accurate, this story is not about scandal. It's about architecture. A marriage that transitioned from monarchy to marketplace required legal restructuring. That restructuring, allegedly finalized in 2020, may have embedded a contingency plan few fully understood. Intellectual property control, executive authority, asset insulation, custodial positioning, each element layered deliberately. The public sees interviews, red carpets, brand launches. Courts see documentation. Judges interpret clauses. And prenups do not operate on emotion, they operate on wording. The unanswered question is not whether Harry and Meghan face tension. Public couples often do. The question is whether the legal framework surrounding them was built for longevity or for exit. If Clause 7 exists as described, then the most consequential decision in this marriage may have occurred quietly, years ago, in a conference room, with signatures and legal language that only now begin to matter. And if the clock is ticking, the world may soon learn whether this was strategic protection or a perfectly timed departure.
Doesn't this prove anything can happen? I mean, minutes ago, you said it was impossible. But look, isn't there a handsome prince?
If you enjoy in-depth coverage of the stories shaping celebrity culture and entertainment, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay connected for the next big story.